Hey, what is going on, guys? RvzStealth here, and in today's video we're going to be taking a look at the new strong and weak champs for patch 9.16. And just thought I'd let you guys know for this week in club.gg, they are reducing the price of their RP for a limited time on August the 8th. So if you guys do have coins sitting around right now, then definitely look to take advantage of this. If you haven't heard of club.gg before, it's an app that allows you to play challenges in game like max CS, max kills. If you win these challenges, you get coins, and with those coins, you can get RP. So be sure to check it out. Link will be down in the description below. Alright, so as always, let's start off with some of the more influential changes for this patch. Mundo is getting some pretty nice changes to his W and to his E. W tenacity is now just going to be 30% at all ranks instead of scaling up to 30%. So this is really nice for Mundo. It might mean that now you don't have to go into legend tenacity or go into the precision tree at all. It can give you some different options there. His E's cooldown is also being reduced there. Once you get it maxed out, it's going to be only 4 seconds at max rank. So you're going to pretty much have that up at all times in mid to late game fights. So a bunch of extra damage there for Mundo in the mid to late game. I do think this change is really nice. Not sure if it's going to bump him up into S tier, but I definitely think he's going to be a solid A tier pick, a much more viable top laner for 9.16. Now next up for Ekko, E bonus magic damage being increased by 10 at all ranks, ultimate's cooldown being changed only at rank 2 and at rank 3, but both being reduced by 20 seconds. So this will increase Ekko's playmaking potential quite a bit in the mid to late game. Whenever you do have your ultimate up, it allows you to play a lot more aggro, so you're going to be able to just play a lot more aggressive more often with Ekko in the mid to late game now. I don't really think it takes away from his main weaknesses though. Right now these buffs don't really cover up his bad laning phase at all. These buffs don't help that out, so I think he's just going to stay an A tier pick despite these pretty good buffs. Alright, so next up here for Fiora, her E's bonus attack speed being increased from 50% up to 90% once you max that out. Cooldown is being lowered in the earlier ranks as well. So this is a pretty interesting change because with the Mundo buffs there, that's nice for Fiora because Fiora's a great pick into Mundo. With Fiora getting buffed here as well, if that matchup is something that becomes more popular next patch, it's definitely going to favor Fiora quite a bit. Also with a couple other tanks getting buffed in this patch here, that's good for Fiora too. So I think that things are trending in the right direction for Fiora for sure. I don't think this will be enough to jump her up into S tier, but it quite possibly could be. We'll have to wait and see, but she's definitely going to be one of the stronger top laners now in 9.16. So Jax actually getting a buff for next patch, kind of odd. Don't think Jax needs a buff right now. He is one of the stronger top laners for sure. So his Q though, it is getting buffed. Cooldown being lowered there in the earlier ranks. Once you max it out, it is going to be the same. So I think this change here, it's not really going to affect Jax too much. Like in certain matchups, it'll help him out a little bit. I feel like this is only a change that's going to help him win matchups harder. It's not really going to help him in his more difficult matchups right now. So I do think it's a nice buff to Jax, but I don't really think he needs it, so he is probably just going to stay an S tier pick for another patch here. So it looks like Lux is getting a bit more power put back into her W after it got kind of gutted a couple patches ago. So shield strength is being increased there, being increased by quite a lot actually. Once you do max it out, it's going to be 40 extra shielding at rank 5 there. So for Lux support, really nice change. This should bump her back up into A tier. After those nerfs she got a couple patches ago, it did put her in a pretty bad spot. So I do kind of understand this change a little bit. I don't think it's going to make her overpowered and make her S tier like she was before, but this change will definitely put her in a solid spot for 9.16. So Syndra getting buffed for 2 patches in a row. Last patch, the changes weren't really that influential. The change to her ultimate, originally it looked like she was getting a really nice buff to her W, but then they went through with like an alt buff, but that didn't really change too much for her. So these changes, if these ones go through, will be a lot more impactful. Q transcendent bonus damage against champions being increased from 15 to 25%. E damage there being increased by 15 at all ranks. So definitely a pretty big buff here to Syndra's all-in combo. Pretty big buff to like her poke damage as well with her Q. So I do think this change is great for Syndra. Should make her an A tier pick at least for the coming patch. For Sion, 2 different buffs here. I guess it's basically one buff because the minimum damage on his Q is being increased by 10 at all ranks, and the max damage from his Q also being increased by 10 at all ranks. So kind of an underwhelming buff to Sion, honestly. I feel like he deserves a little bit more. Some of his base stats are also getting buffed. I didn't have them up on screen here though because they're super small buffs. It's like +2 base HP or something like that. So those changes aren't really going to matter. This change here, don't really think it's going to matter either. Sion's going to stay an A tier top laner for this coming patch. Alright, so another mid laner getting buffed, Leblanc QAP ratio being increased from 30% up to 40%. She did just get buffed last patch as well, so these buffs should start to add up over time for Leblanc. I still think she needs like one more buff or something to put her in at least an A tier spot. Right now she is performing pretty poorly in solo queue. She is still one of the worst performing mid laners right now, so I don't think this change will even jump her up into A tier. It could, but I still think LeBlanc is going to stay a B tier mid laner. So one of the worst performing junglers right now win rate wise in this patch, Nocturne, he is getting buffed. So W bonus attack speed being increased by 10% at all ranks, max bonus attack speed being increased from 2 times base speed up to 3 times base speed. So when you factor in the lethal tempo as well into this, the amount of attack speed you're gonna have with Nocturne next patch is gonna be pretty insane. Does increase his dueling potential by quite a lot here. So I do think it's safe to say Nocturne will jump back up into A tier and be a pretty good jungle pick for this patch. So Pantheon takes home the award of the least impactful change for 9.16, HP per level being increased from 87 up to 95, so that's going to be a grand total of 144 extra HP at level 18, so shouldn't really matter too much at all. I guess they don't really want to do anything to Pantheon right now. He is getting the rework in the next couple patches here, so there's no point really in working on this version of Pantheon. I just think they should leave him how he is, so he will stay an A tier pick. So one of the most forgotten champions in League, Ziggs, he's finally getting some recognition in this patch. WAP ratio being increased by 15%, cooldown being decreased there at the earlier ranks. Ultimate, the cooldown on that is being decreased at the later ranks, so actually some pretty solid buffs here to Ziggs. I do think this should be enough to bump him up into A tier for next patch. Should be a pretty decent mid lane pick. So Kassadin is actually getting buffed for next patch, kind of similar to Jax. I feel like Cass is in a pretty good spot, doesn't really need a buff right now, but W damage being increased by quite a bit there, 30 damage it looks like at all ranks, so pretty solid buff here to Kassadin. This might even be like a little bit too much, we'll have to see, but this could bump him up into S tier. I do think that he's going to be at least a very solid high A tier pick for next patch. Very good champion for solo queue, so if you want to play Kassadin in 9.16, I definitely recommend it. Now Shen is getting buffed again. It feels like this champion has been buffed almost every second patch for the past couple of months now, so this could actually be the coming patch to where Shen does make the jump up into S tier. Q max HP damage being increased by 1% there. E damage is being increased by 20 at all ranks, so pretty substantial buffs to Shen. I do think that he's going to be one of the stronger top laners now for 9.16, so definitely look out for Shen for the coming patch. Now for Singe, base mana being increased there by 40, so that's pretty good. Singe is a champion that does rely on mana quite a bit in the early game, so that's nice for him. Ultimate bonus stats are being increased there, more so at the later ranks, so a buff to his late game there on his ultimate. Don't think these changes mean too much. Obviously the mana change there is nice, it is going to help him out in the early game, but these changes aren't going to jump him up or anything. He's going to stay an A tier pick. Now Azir is getting hit with a pretty small nerf. His Q cooldown in the later ranks is being increased, so that is a bit of a hit to his mid to late game. Don't think it really affects him too much though for solo queue. He's not the greatest pick right now in solo queue. He's around like a B/A tier pick, so I expect him to remain the same with this change. Now for Corki, he is getting nerfed as well, so two of the most prominent picks in pro play at the moment both getting nerfed. So base AD is being lowered by 4, 80 per level being lowered by 0.5, so this is actually pretty big. On paper it may not seem very big, but if you understand that Corki, his base AD is very important to him because sheen damage does factor, or it does play off of your base AD, so the fact that this is getting nerfed here by 4 is going to reduce Corki's damage by quite a lot. The fact that his AD per level is also being lowered will hurt his mid to late game there, so for solo queue I think this is going to drop Corki from A tier down into B tier. So for Riven, Q cooldown is being changed there from 12 scaling down to 10 to just 12 at all ranks now. So I do think this change is going to be pretty impactful in certain situations. If you're trying to like escape as Riven, sometimes you'll find that your Q just comes up in time to give you the bonus movement speed to allow you to close the gap or allow you to get away. So I do think this change is pretty impactful. I don't think it's going to like drop Riven down very far at all. It's not going to do anything like that, but it's either going to drop her down into A tier or make her a pretty low S tier pick for this patch. So Sejuani here getting a hit to her bonus armor and MR in the early game, but getting an increase to the scaling on it, and this is from her passive. So the base is being changed there, being lowered from 20 down to 10, but the scaling or the percent is being increased from 25% up to 35%. So nerf to Sejuani's early to mid game, buff to her late game. Q cooldown though, it is being increased here from 17 up to 20, and it is being increased from 11 to 12 once you get it maxed out. So not really super big changes or anything. I think Sej is going to stay an A tier jungle pick. Pretty good pick here for another patch. So Yuumi is getting hit with a bunch of different nerfs here to her Q. So Q empowered damage is being lowered by 40 once you do get it maxed out. Slow there, it is being lowered by 20% at rank 1, only being lowered by 4% once you do get it maxed out, but that is a hit to her early game there. Slow duration is being changed. It's being changed from 1.25 seconds at rank 1, scaling to 1.65, just to 1.5 at all ranks now. And then cooldown is being increased on the ability. Cooldown is being increased more so in the earlier ranks. It's going to be pretty much the same once you do max it out, but I do think the nerf there to her Q's empowered damage is the biggest one, and the fact that this ability is pretty spammable. This ability is something that you can use quite a bit for poke in the early to mid game. I do think this change is going to be pretty impactful towards Yuumi, and for solo Q, in my opinion, she's going to drop from A tier down into B tier. Now for Sylas, this is a hit to Sylas jungle, so Q explosion is now going to deal 55% damage against monsters. This is going to hurt his clear quite a bit in the early game for next patch, and I think for Sylas in the jungle, he is going to drop down from A tier down into B tier. For mid lane, top lane Sylas, this won't affect him at all, so he is going to remain an A tier pick for those roles for next patch. Now for Ezreal, Q AP ratio being lowered by 15%, E cooldown being increased more so at the early ranks. They're going to scale down to 13 later on in the game. So this is a hit to the AP build we're seeing a lot of Ezreal players go for right now, going for like Luden's Ekko as a third item, grabbing a Hextech Gunblade in there. So this should mean that less players go for that build now. I'm not too sure if it's going to mean that the build completely goes away, but it's definitely a hit to that build. We might see more Ezreal players just go back to going Blade the Ruined King as their third item on him, but definitely a hit to the AP setup for 916. Now for Sivir, W80 ratio is being decreased more so at the early ranks, so it doesn't really affect her scaling at all, doesn't affect her mid to late game, so I don't think this change should mean too much for Sivir. At the very most, it would drop her down to A tier, but I don't even think that's really possible. I still think Sivir should remain an S tier pick. And then for Tahm Kench getting nerfed, so this is another nerf more so targeted towards competitive scene. Solo Q Kench is actually pretty decent right now, like he's an A tier pick in both the top lane and in the support role. So with these changes here, E shield duration being lowered by 1 second, base move speed being lowered by 10. Base move speed change there is the bigger one, I'd say, definitely is going to affect him a little bit, but I think he is going to remain an A tier pick for top lane and for support for 916. So that is going to be all for this video, guys. That is what we're looking at heading into patch 9.16. Now, obviously, these changes might not go through. Some of the changes might get changed as the PvE cycle does progress, but these are the champions that are most likely to get buffed and nerfed for the coming patch. So that being said, guys, if you did enjoy the video, then be sure to drop a like and subscribe if you have yet to already. So thanks for watching. Have an awesome day, and I will see you in my next video.